Take this rose from me, and I'll marry you.
For hundreds of elite guests. Laughter filled the opulent hall, but the moment her trembling fingers grazed the velvet petals, a profound silence consumed the space, as if comforting the souls of those long trampled and humiliated. Dominic Vance's Blackwood Estate blazed with dazzling light, as if the stars of the night sky had descended to rest upon each crystal chandelier. 200 dignitaries held flutes of the finest champagne, their laughter echoing arrogantly off the arched ceilings. Tonight was an elite charity gala hosted by Dominic, a man who wielded absolute power in the region. Within that dazzling splendor, Aaliyah Moore stood frozen near the edge of the room in a simple maid's uniform and white apron. She had long learned that the best way to survive in this colossal estate was to become invisible. Never make eye contact, never speak unless asked, and never exist beyond her assigned role. But tonight felt different, as an inexplicable tension hung in the air. The morning sun barely pierced the heavy velvet drapes of Blackwood Estate when Aaliyah Moore's alarm chimed softly at 5 o'clock. Without a moment of hesitation, she silenced the phone and slipped out of her narrow bed in the staff quarters. Her muscles ached from yesterday's endless polishing of the grand ballroom floors, but she pushed the fatigue aside. Her mind instantly went to her younger brother, Leo, and his upcoming college tuition payment. Every aching joint and long hour was worth it if it meant keeping him in school. By 5:30, Aaliyah was already in the sprawling industrial kitchen, tying her crisp white apron over her simple black dress. The air smelled of freshly ground coffee beans and burnt toast from the early shift. Within minutes, Mrs. Evelyn Brooks, the head housekeeper, marched into the room with her usual rigid posture and sharp eyes. Mrs. Brooks missed nothing, running the multi-million-dollar estate with the precision of a military barracks. One misplaced fork or a single speck of dust on a mahogany table meant a stern reprimand. "Good morning, Aaliyah," Mrs. Brooks said, her voice cutting through the quiet kitchen like a knife. "Today is the annual charity gala preparation. Do not let your mind wander. The West Wing needs dusting, the silver candelabras must shine without a single smudge, and you are assigned to assist in the main hall by evening. Am I understood?" "Yes, Mrs. Brooks," Aaliyah replied calmly, keeping her gaze respectful and fixed downward, mastering the art of absolute invisibility that kept her safe in this intimidating world. For the next 4 hours, Aaliyah moved like a ghost through the cavernous halls of the estate. She climbed towering ladders to dust crystal chandeliers, polished generations-old silver until her fingers grew raw, and carried heavy linens up and down the sweeping marble staircases. Yet, despite the exhausting physical labor, her thoughts remained anchored on Leo. During a brief 10-minute break at noon, she pulled out her phone to read a text message from him. He had sent a photo of his latest chemistry textbook, expressing how hard he was studying to make her proud. A warm smile touched Aaliyah's lips, driving away the exhaustion and renewing her quiet resolve to endure whatever hardships came her way. By late afternoon, the estate was a flurry of activity as caterers, florists, and high society planners rushed in to transform the grand ballroom. Mrs. Brooks inspected every corner with a critical eye, barking orders at the junior staff. Aaliyah quietly blended into the background, carrying trays of champagne flutes and arranging decorative centerpieces with meticulous care. As the sun began to set, casting long amber shadows across the manicured lawns outside, the first luxury sedans started rolling up the paved driveway. Wealthy executives, glittering socialites, and powerful politicians stepped out onto the red carpet, dressed in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. Inside the hall, the atmosphere shifted instantly into a buzzing hub of elite ambition and superficial charm. Aaliyah stood near the edge of a massive marble pillar, holding a silver tray, watching the glittering crowd with a quiet detachment. She knew she belonged to a completely different universe from the people laughing and clinking glasses around her. But as the doors opened to announce the arrival of Dominic Vance, the billionaire owner of the estate, a sudden, heavy chill swept through the room. Aaliyah looked up, her eyes involuntarily drawn toward the center of the hall, sensing that the fragile piece of her hidden life was about to shatter forever. The grand ballroom buzzed with high society gossip and laughter as the charity gala reached its peak. Under the dazzling light of crystal chandeliers, politicians, CEOs, and socialites mingled, drinking expensive champagne and flaunting designer clothes. Dominic Vance stood near the center of the room, looking bored by the superficial flattery surrounding him. Standing close by was Vanessa Sterling, his high society fiancée, whose smile looked tight and calculated as she constantly sought to draw his attention toward her father's political allies. Aaliyah kept her head down, moving quietly through the edges of the crowd with her silver tray. She focused entirely on her duties, hopping to blend into the background until the night finally ended. But the heavy tension in the air kept growing, making it difficult to ignore the restless energy of the room. Suddenly, the live band stopped playing, and the murmur of conversation died down. Dominic raised a glass, his deep voice carrying effortlessly across the spacious hall. Instead of making the standard polite speech about charity and philanthropy, his eyes scanned the crowd with a cold, piercing intensity. He spoke about the emptiness of luxury and the hypocrisy of those who pretended to care about the less fortunate while caring only for status. Whispers broke out among the guests as Dominic walked away from the podium, stepping down onto the main floor. The crowd parted automatically before him. He walked past wealthy executives and glittering socialites, ignoring Vanessa entirely as she reached out a hand with a confident, expectant smile. Instead, Dominic walked straight past her, his gaze locked firmly on the quiet perimeter of the room. Aaliyah froze as she realized he was walking directly toward her pillar. Her heart hammered against her ribs and her breath caught in her throat. She tried to step back into the shadows, but it was too late. Dominic stopped just inches away from her, towering over her in his custom-tailored tuxedo. From his pocket, he drew a single, deep red rose, its velvet petals contrasting sharply with the stark white of Aaliyah's apron. He held it out toward her, the silence in the grand ballroom becoming absolute. "Take this rose from me, and I will marry you," Dominic said, his voice loud enough for the entire room to hear. Gasps echoed through the hall. Utter shock paralyzed the guests, who stared in disbelief at the billionaire offering a marriage proposal to a lowly estate maid. Vanessa's face twisted with pure fury and humiliation, her hands clenching into tight fists as a dark glare fixed on Aaliyah. Traumatized by the sudden spotlight, Aaliyah looked up into Dominic's intense eyes, realizing her quiet life was gone forever. The morning after the gala, Blackwood Estate felt less like a home and more like a pressure cooker. Word of Dominic's public proposal to a maid had spread like wildfire through the media and high society circles, turning the estate into a fortress of judgment. Aaliyah tried to maintain her regular routine, but she could no longer move through the halls unnoticed. Everywhere she turned, senior staff whispered behind their hands, and the few guests still staying at the estate cast cold, disdainful glances in her direction. In the grand study, the atmosphere was equally tense. Dominic sat behind his massive mahogany desk, staring at a stack of urgent corporate memos and media reports. The board of directors was in an uproar, threatening emergency votes to question his stability and leadership. Before Dominic could even address the corporate fallout, the heavy oak doors pushed open without a knock, and his mother, Vivienne Vance, marched into the room with a look of absolute fury. "Dominic, what on earth has gotten into you?" Vivienne demanded, her voice sharp and trembling with anger. "Have you completely lost your mind? Proposing to a nameless, penniless maid in front of the entire elite community. You have humiliated our family name, insulted your engagement to Vanessa, and handed your business rivals the ultimate weapon to destroy everything your father built." Dominic did not flinch. He leaned back in his leather chair, meeting his mother's glare with a cool, unwavering gaze. "Mother, my personal life is my own decision. For years, I have lived according to your rules and the expectations of this society, surrounded by people who only care about wealth and power. I chose Aaliyah because she possesses real integrity, something entirely missing from this household." Vivienne slammed her hand onto the desk, her face pale with rage. "Integrity does not run a multi-billion-dollar empire, Dominic. Xavier Cross and our other corporate competitors are already circling like vultures, planning to use this scandal to tank our stock prices and question your mental competence at the next board meeting. If you do not put an end to this ridiculous charade immediately and announce it was a cruel joke, you will face a full shareholder revolt." Meanwhile, downstairs in the kitchen, Aaliyah faced her own form of intimidation. Mrs. Brooks stood before her, arms crossed tightly over her chest, eyes narrowed with a mix of disbelief and stern disapproval. "Aaliyah, you must understand the gravity of what has happened," Mrs. Brooks said coldly. "You may have caught Mr. Vance's attention for a fleeting moment, but the world these people live in will chew you up and spit you out. Do not let this foolishness make you forget your place." Despite the crushing weight of the hostility surrounding her, Aaliyah kept her chin up. She thought of her brother Leo and the quiet dignity her parents had taught her before they passed away. She had not asked for Dominic's proposal, but running away in fear was not an option either. As the pressure mounted from both corporate vultures and angry family members, Aaliyah realized she was standing right in the center of a lion's den, and there was no turning back. The heavy isolation inside Blackwood Estate grew more oppressive with each passing hour, but Aaliyah soon discovered she was not entirely alone in the storm. While most of the staff avoided her eyes and high society visitors whispered malicious comments behind ornate pillars, a few steady individuals chose to stand by her side. The first unexpected ally was Harrison Reed, the estate's veteran head gardener who had tended to the grounds for over 30 years. While delivering fresh roses to the East Wing, Harrison offered a reassuring nod and a quiet piece of advice, telling her that character always outlasts wealth and urging her not to let the cold luxury of the estate break her spirit. Later that afternoon, Dr. Amelia Carter arrived at the estate to check on the family patriarch, Robert Vance. Unlike the other guests who treated the servants like furniture, Dr. Carter always greeted Aaliyah with a warm, genuine smile. Stopping in the hallway, the doctor gently touched Aaliyah's arm and commended her for handling the intense public scrutiny with such grace. Dr. Carter reminded her that true worth is never defined by a title or a bank account, offering a listening ear whenever the pressure became too heavy to carry alone. The most significant shift, however, came from within Dominic's inner circle. Nathan Cole, Dominic's lifelong best friend and business partner, arrived at the estate to speak sense into the situation. Instead of joining Vivienne and the corporate board in condemning Dominic, Nathan decided to observe Aaliyah for himself. Finding her organizing files in the library, Nathan expected to see an opportunistic gold digger. Instead, he found a young woman quietly reading a nursing textbook while working diligently, entirely unbothered by the chaos around her. Nathan watched quietly from the doorway before clearing his throat to announce his presence. "I must admit, I came here expecting to find someone entirely different," Nathan said, his tone softening into a friendly smile. "Dominic can be stubborn, but he rarely makes mistakes when it comes to people. It seems you possess a quiet strength that this family desperately needs." Aaliyah looked up, surprised by the unexpected kindness. "Thank you, Mr. Cole, but I am just trying to survive the day." "Call me Nathan," he replied warmly. "And trust me, you are going to need more than survival instincts if you intend to stand beside Dominic in this war. Xavier Cross and the board are already plotting their next move, and Vanessa is not going away quietly. But you have friends in unexpected places now. Do not forget that." With Harrison's quiet encouragement, Dr. Carter's compassionate support, and Nathan's alliance from within the inner circle, Aaliyah felt the heavy burden on her shoulders lighten just a fraction. She realized that while high society wanted to isolate and crush her, the genuine bonds forming around her might just be enough to weather the coming storm. Across the city, far away from the heavy atmosphere of Blackwood Estate, a very different kind of strategy was taking shape in the sleek, glass-walled office of Victor Kane. As Dominic Vance's most ruthless business rival, Victor had spent years looking for any weakness that could crack Blackwood International Holdings. When the news broke about Dominic's public proposal to an estate maid, Victor saw the ultimate opportunity to strike. The heavy mahogany doors of his office opened, and Vanessa Sterling stepped inside. Her expression was cold, her eyes burning with a deep, humiliating anger that matched Victor's own ambition. She walked across the polished marble floor and took a seat opposite his desk, tossing her designer handbag onto the leather chair with sharp frustration. Victor did not waste time with pleasantries. He poured 2 glasses of scotch, sliding one across the desk toward her. "It seems your former fiancé has truly lost his mind, Vanessa," Victor said, a sharp, calculating smirk playing on his lips, proposing to a lowly servant in front of the entire elite community. "He has handed us a golden key to destroy his empire on a silver platter." Vanessa took a slow sip of the drink, her fingers tightening around the glass. "Dominic has always been arrogant, believing his wealth and power make him untouchable," she replied, her voice laced with venom. "But this foolish stunt has crossed the line. He has humiliated me, insulted my family, and disgraced the board of directors. Whatever it takes, Victor, I want to help you tear him down. I want that Maid exposed and broken, and I want Dominic to crawl back begging for mercy when his company collapses." Victor leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. "That is precisely why we are partners in this, Vanessa. The upcoming emergency board meeting is our window. We do not just expose the girl, we weaponize her background. We will dig up every detail of her past, fabricate whatever narrative we need about her family, and paint her as an opportunistic fraud planted by corporate spies to manipulate Dominic's mental stability." The plan was simple, cruel, and precise. Victor's private investigators had already started digging into Aaliyah's life, pulling records of her deceased parents, her financial struggles, and her younger brother Leo's college tuition payments. They intended to twist every honest sacrifice Aaliyah had ever made into a sinister plot of deception. By the time the board of directors gathered for the emergency vote, the narrative would be airtight, designed to trigger a massive shareholder panic and force Dominic out as CEO. Vanessa smiled coldly, her desire for revenge completely blinding her to the cruelty of what they were about to unleash. "Let them have their little romance for now," she whispered softly. "By the time we finish exposing her, neither Dominic nor that little Maid will have anything left." Unaware of the dark storm gathering against them in the corporate shadows, Aaliyah continued her daily work at the estate, relying on her quiet resilience and the small circle of allies forming around her. But as Victor Kane and Vanessa Sterling finalized their malicious blueprint, the battle for Blackwood International Holdings was about to enter a brutal, unforgiving phase where innocence would mean nothing against the ruthless ambition of the corporate elite. The tension inside Blackwood Estate reached its breaking point by the end of the week. While Victor Kane and Vanessa Sterling finalized their malicious scheme, the final pieces of their trap were quietly put into motion inside the executive offices. Late in the evening, when the corridors grew quiet and most of the staff had retired to their quarters, a masked figure slipped through a side entrance, using a compromised security code to access Dominic's private study. The intruder moved swiftly toward the mahogany desk, unlocking a secure filing cabinet using a stolen administrative key. Inside lay confidential merger documents and proprietary research files belonging to Blackwood International Holdings. Carefully, the saboteur slipped a series of fabricated flash drives and falsified financial ledgers right into the drawer assigned to Aaliyah for document organizing, framing her as an internal corporate spy leaking top-secret data to a rival firm. The next morning, the fallout began with terrifying speed. Dominic was in the middle of a high-stakes briefing when 2 senior security guards, accompanied by an executive board member loyal to Victor Kane, marched uninvited into his office. "Mr. Vance, we have received an anonymous security alert regarding a severe data breach within the estate," the board member announced coldly, not waiting for permission to speak. "Confidential corporate assets have been compromised, and all evidence points directly to your new protégé, the Maid." Dominic stood up, his eyes flashing with immediate fury. "You burst into my office with baseless accusations based on an anonymous alert. Produce concrete proof or leave this room immediately." The security guard stepped forward, holding out a digital tablet and a set of recovered documents pulled straight from Aaliyah's workstation. "We searched the lower staff quarters and administrative desks as authorized by emergency corporate compliance protocols. We found classified merger files and encrypted flash drives containing stolen data hidden directly in her workspace." Dominic stared at the files, a cold shock hitting him. He knew Aaliyah would never commit corporate espionage, but the trap was laid with absolute precision, designed to trap him legally and force the board's hand. Before Dominic could launch an investigation to clear her name, word spread through the estate, and security personnel were dispatched to detain Aaliyah immediately. Aaliyah was sweeping the floor of the East Wing gallery when two guards stepped into the hallway, blocking her path. "Aaliyah Moore, you are ordered to come with us to the executive board room immediately for questioning regarding a major security breach," the lead guard stated, his voice devoid of any warmth. Confusion and fear gripped Aaliyah's heart. She dropped her broom, her mind racing as she tried to understand what was happening. "I have done nothing wrong," she protested quietly, stepping back. "You can explain that to the board of directors," the guard replied, grabbing her arm firmly and escorting her through the grand corridors while terrified junior staff members watched from a distance. When the heavy doors of the boardroom opened, Aaliyah was pushed inside under the harsh glare of dozens of powerful executives. Dominic sat at the head of the long conference table, his face a mask of controlled fury, while Vivienne and several hostile board members glared at her with undisguised hatred. On the table lay the fabricated files, staged perfectly to incriminate her. "There she is, the plant who infiltrated our estate to destroy us from within," one of the board members declared loudly, pointing a finger at Aaliyah. "Mr. Vance brought a common criminal into our inner circle, risking the future of every shareholder for a foolish romance." Dominic stood up from his chair, his voice cutting through the hostile whispers of the room with absolute authority. "Silence. This is a fabricated setup, and everyone in this room knows it." "If it is a setup, prove it," Victor Kane's voice echoed smoothly as he stepped out from the doorway, having arrived unannounced to witness the kill. "The evidence is clear, Dominic. She is a fraud, and you have two choices. Either you terminate her immediately, hand her over to federal authorities for corporate espionage, and step down as CEO to protect the company, or the board will strip you of your title today, destroy your reputation, and ruin Blackwood International Holdings forever." The entire room fell into a suffocating silence. All eyes turned toward Dominic, waiting to see if he would protect the innocent young woman he had chosen, or sacrifice her to save the multi-billion-dollar empire his family had built. The heavy oak doors of the boardroom remained locked in a tense deadlock as Victor Kane smiled with cold satisfaction, waiting for Dominic to break. The ultimatum hung in the air like a suffocating cloud, demanding a choice between a multi-billion-dollar empire and a defenseless young woman. Before Dominic could speak, the double doors swung open with a resounding thud. Richard Blackwood, the formidable retired senior advisor and founding pillar of the company, walked slowly into the room, leaning heavily on his carved mahogany cane. His sharp eyes scanned the hostile faces of the board members before resting squarely on Victor Kane. "Enough of this theatrical nonsense," Richard's deep voice echoed authoritatively through the silent hall, cutting straight through the tension. "You sit here orchestrating a pathetic charade, weaponizing fabricated files and an anonymous security alert to bully a young woman and steal control of a company built on decades of genuine integrity. I have reviewed the preliminary legal fallout and internal server logs with our compliance team, and it takes little expertise to see that these files were accessed using a compromised administrative override code late last night, hours after Miss Moore had already clocked out and left the premises." Victor's smug smile faltered slightly as murmurs broke out among the shareholders. Richard did not stop there. He walked past the conference table, coming to a halt directly beside Aaliyah, who stood trembling under the weight of the hostile accusations. Richard placed a reassuring hand gently on her shoulder, offering a calm, steady look of support. "For decades, I have watched greedy opportunists try to tear down Blackwood International Holdings from the inside out," Richard continued, turning his gaze back toward Victor and the corrupted board members. "They hide behind technicalities and staged scandals because they lack the courage to compete honestly in the open market. Miss Moore has worked tirelessly within these walls with more dignity, honesty, and character than anyone sitting at this table. If this board chooses to validate a crude, transparent frame-up just to satisfy a corporate power grab, then you are destroying the very foundation of this enterprise. Dominic seized the momentum instantly, stepping forward to stand shoulder to shoulder with Richard and Aaliyah. "You heard him," Dominic said, his voice cold and commanding. "The emergency vote is adjourned. Anyone who continues to push these fraudulent claims will face immediate termination and full legal prosecution for conspiracy and corporate sabotage. Security, escort Mr. Kane off the premises immediately." Victor's face twisted with rage as two security guards stepped forward, signaling the collapse of his trap. Recognizing that the immediate coup had failed, Victor turned on his heel and stormed out of the boardroom, shooting a venomous glare at Aaliyah and Richard on his way. As the doors closed behind the corporate intruders, the heavy atmosphere in the room shifted. Several board members lowered their heads, silently realizing they had nearly participated in a reckless mistake. Dominic turned to Aaliyah, his expression softening from fierce determination into deep relief and warmth. Aaliyah stood in the center of the grand room, her heart still racing. But for the first time since walking into the estate, she knew she was not standing alone against the storm. The dust in the boardroom had barely settled when Dominic, Nathan, and Harrison gathered in the private security office to trace the origin of the fake files. Nathan sat before the main console, tapping rapidly on the keyboard while reviewing the digital access logs from the previous night. The high-resolution security camera footage from the Eastern Service Corridor flickered onto the monitor, revealing a masked figure using a compromised administrative override code to slip into the study and plant the flash drives at Aaliyah's desk. With a few expert keystrokes, Nathan bypassed the encrypted proxy server the intruder had used to mask their identity. The data ping revealed a direct communication trail connecting the digital breach straight to an external IP address registered under Victor Kane's private corporate network. Attached to the transmission logs were recorded audio and digital message transcripts between Victor and Vanessa Sterling, detailing the entire conspiracy to frame Aaliyah, manufacture corporate panic, and orchestrate a hostile takeover of Blackwood International Holdings. Dominic stared at the monitor, his jaw clenching as the absolute coldness of Vanessa's betrayal set in. She had not only weaponized his personal life to destroy the company, but she had willingly conspired to ruin an innocent young woman just to satisfy her own bruised ego and thirst for power. Without wasting a single moment, Dominic instructed Nathan to compile the complete evidence package, including the server logs, video recordings, and message transcripts, and distribute them immediately to every member of the board of directors. An emergency full board assembly was called for the following afternoon in the main executive auditorium. The atmosphere was thick with tension as the directors took their seats, whispering nervously among themselves about the recent security breach. Victor Kane walked into the auditorium with an air of absolute arrogance, flanked by Vanessa Sterling, both expecting to finalize their hostile coup and push Dominic out of power once and for all. Victor took his seat at the center table with a smug smile, believing he had secured total victory. Dominic walked to the front of the auditorium, his expression cool, composed, and unyielding. Behind him, the massive projection screen lit up, displaying the digital access logs, the security camera footage of the masked intruder, and the intercepted communication transcripts between Victor and Vanessa. Before we discuss any further votes regarding the stability of this company, Dominic's voice rang out clearly across the silent hall. Let us review the true origin of our recent security breach. Whispers exploded through the room as the board members stared at the concrete evidence on the screen. The footage clearly showed the masked saboteur entering the estate using codes linked to Victor's external network, while the message transcripts explicitly outlined Victor and Vanessa's plot to frame a staff member and destabilize the corporation from within. Vanessa's face turned completely pale, her confident facade shattering instantly as she realized their entire conspiracy had been fully exposed for everyone to see. Victor jumped to his feet, his face twisted in sudden panic and fury. "This is a fabricated digital forgery," he shouted, pointing a shaking finger at the screen. You are manipulating the system to cover up your own incompetence. The evidence has been cryptographically verified by our independent cybersecurity partners and cross-referenced with external server providers, Nathan stated calmly, stepping forward with a comprehensive legal file. The trail is absolute, Victor. Your conspiracy to commit corporate espionage, unlawful trespassing, and malicious frame-up has been fully documented and transmitted directly to federal authorities. Murmurs of outrage swept through the board of directors. Shareholders who had previously questioned Dominic now turned their sharp glares toward Victor and Vanessa, realizing they had been manipulated into participating in a criminal conspiracy. One by one, the senior board members stood up, voting unanimously to permanently ban Victor Kane from any future business dealings with Blackwood International Holdings and to sever all corporate ties with the Sterling family estate. Realizing that his career, his reputation, and his freedom were completely destroyed, Victor grabbed his briefcase and stormed out of the auditorium in utter defeat, refusing to look anyone in the eye. Vanessa sat frozen in her chair for a moment, her eyes filled with humiliation and regret, before she hurried out behind him, completely disgraced. As the doors closed behind the defeated conspirators, a quiet wave of relief washed over the room. Dominic looked out across the auditorium, his mind finally clear of the corporate shadows that had threatened to tear everything apart. He knew the road ahead would require hard work to rebuild trust, but for the first time, the path was entirely free of deceit. The heavy iron gates of Blackwood Estate swung wide open under the morning sun, welcoming a new era free from the shadows of deceit and corporate greed. Inside the grand ballroom, where months ago an arrogant challenge had shocked high society, a quiet and elegant transformation had taken place. The crystal chandeliers caught the morning light, casting a warm glow over a small gathering of genuine friends, trusted staff, and family members who had learned the true meaning of loyalty. Aaliyah stood before the tall mirror in a simple yet breathtaking ivory dress, her reflection showing a woman who had weathered the harshest storms without ever losing her core dignity. The years of quiet sacrifice, the long hours of exhausting labor, and the painful moments of doubt had all led to this single, defining moment. She thought of her brother Leo, who was now smiling brightly in the front row, his college education fully secure and his future bright. She thought of Harrison, Dr. Carter, Nathan, and Richard, whose steadfast courage had shielded her when the world tried to break her down. Soft footsteps approached, and Dominic entered the room. He was dressed in a classic tailored suit, but the cold, guarded armor that once defined the billionaire CEO was entirely gone. His eyes softened with a deep, profound tenderness as he looked at Aaliyah, seeing not just the woman who had captured his heart, but the anchor that had saved his soul from the emptiness of wealth and power. "Are you ready, Aaliyah?" Dominic asked softly, his voice carrying a quiet warmth that chased away any lingering doubts. "I am," Aaliyah replied with a gentle, radiant smile, taking his outstretched hand. Hand in hand, they walked out into the sunlit garden where the ceremony was set. The air was sweet with the scent of blooming roses, tended with care by Harrison and the estate staff. As they stood before the small gathering, the officiant spoke words of unity, emphasizing that love is not measured by social status, corporate titles, or family lineage, but by the quiet resilience of two hearts choosing each other through every trial. Dominic pulled the same deep red rose from his lapel, the very symbol of the challenge that had started it all, and gently placed it in Aaliyah's hand. This time, there were no gasps of shock or whispers of malice from the crowd, only heartfelt applause and joyful tears. When Dominic leaned in to kiss his bride, the cheers of their closest friends echoed across the manicured lawns. Aaliyah looked around at the faces of the people who had stood by her side through the darkest of times, knowing that the trials they had overcome had only made their bond unbreakable. Wealth and power could build mansions and empires, but as the sun crested over the estate, illuminating their future together, it was clear that true value would always reside in the human heart.